My son tried to kill me with a box of poisoned chocolates. 40 years. I raised him for 40 years. I loved him. I gave him everything I had, and this is how he repaid me. With arsenic hidden inside Belgian chocolate and a card that said, "To the best mom in the world. My name is Emily. I am 69 years old. And this is the story of how the son I adopted when he was a 2-year-old orphan decided that my life was worth less than $200,000. But let's start at the beginning. That morning of March 15th, Chicago woke up with a bright blue sky. One of those skies that makes you believe the world is a beautiful place. I woke up in my small apartment in the suburbs, the same apartment where I had lived for the last 30 years. First with my husband, Michael. Then alone since cancer took him 15 years ago. The apartment wasn't luxurious. White walls with some cracks, wooden furniture we bought when we got married, curtains that had lost their original color long ago. But it was clean, ordered, full of family photos in every corner. On the nightstand next to my bed was a photo of Michael and me on our wedding day. We were so young then, so full of hope, he in his black suit, me in my white dress that my mother had sewn by hand. 45 years had passed since that day, and next to that photo, another one of Daniel at 10 years old, smiling with that smile that melted my heart. My little Daniel, the boy who came into my life when I believed I would never be a mother. 69 years old. Today I was turning 69. I got up slowly as people my age do. My knees aren't what they used to be, and my back protests every morning. But my mind was still clear, thank God. That was the important thing. I went to the kitchen to make coffee with milk. The ritual of every morning. Heating the milk, adding the instant coffee, sitting by the window to watch the city wake up. From my 4th floor I could see the street, neighbors leaving for work, children running to school. I thought about calling Daniel to see if he remembered my birthday, but I decided not to. I didn't want to seem desperate for attention. If my son wanted to congratulate me, he would. If not, well, I was used to his forgetfulness. Since he married Rachel 8 years ago, everything had changed. The visits became scarcer, the calls colder, the hugs more distant. At first I justified it. He's busy with work, he has his own family. It is normal for him to drift away a little. But over time, the distance became an abyss. Rachel never liked me. I knew that from the first day I met her. There was something in her look, a coldness she tried to hide with fake smiles and polite words. Michael, who was still alive then, warned me, "Be careful with that girl, Emily. She has the eyes of someone who calculates everything." But I didn't listen. Daniel was in love, and that was all that mattered to me. My son was happy. What else could a mother ask for? Now, so many years later, I understand that a mother's love can blind us. It makes us see what we want to see, ignore what we don't want to accept. And that blindness almost cost me my life. The doorbell rang at 11 in the morning. I left my coffee cup on the table and went to open it. At the door was a delivery man in a blue uniform holding an elegant box. "Mrs. Emily Watson?" "Yes, that's me. You have a package. Sign here, please." I signed without paying much attention and took the box. It was heavy, wrapped in gold paper with a red ribbon. Very elegant, very expensive. I closed the door and took the package to the dining table. Carefully, I untied the ribbon and opened the paper. Inside was a box of chocolates from a fancy artisan shop famous for its exclusive creations. Each truffle cost a small fortune, and on top of the box, a card. I took it with trembling hands. I recognized Daniel's handwriting immediately. "To the best mom in the world. With love, Daniel." My eyes filled with tears. 3 years. It had been 3 years since Daniel had given me anything. Not on my birthday, not on Christmas, not on Mother's Day. There were always excuses, work, money, the kids, and I always justified him because that is what mothers do. We justify. We forgive. We keep loving even if it hurts. But now here it was, a box of expensive chocolates with a handwritten card. My son had remembered me. My son still loved me. I opened the box carefully. The chocolates were works of art, perfect shapes, gold decorations, scents that promised exquisite flavors. Dark chocolate, milk chocolate, filled with fruits and liqueurs and creams, a selection fit for a king. My first instinct was to eat one immediately. But then I thought of my grandchildren, Lily and Jack. Those children were my weakness. Despite all the contempt Rachel showed me, I adored those kids. They were my Daniel when he was little. With their curious eyes and innocent smiles, these chocolates are too good for me alone, I thought. Rachel and the kids will enjoy them much more. It was that generosity, that damn habit of mine of always thinking of others before myself that saved my life. Without knowing it, without even suspecting it, I had just avoided my own death. I wrapped the box again carefully, put on a decent dress and grabbed my car keys. My old Ford sedan had been with me for 15 years, but it still ran well. Michael always said cars are like people. If you take care of them, they last a lifetime. The drive to their house was about an hour on the highway, a trip I made less and less frequently. Before, when Daniel lived closer, I saw him every week. Now with luck, once a month, and always at the door, never inside the house. While driving, I let my mind wander through memories. It was 1985. I was 29 years old and had just married Michael. We were happy, in love, full of plans for the future. We wanted to have children, many children, fill our house with laughter and life. But fate had other plans. After 2 years of trying, we went to the doctor. The tests were clear. I couldn't have children. A problem with my ovaries? Something that had no solution. I remember the day the doctor gave us the news. Michael took my hand and told me, "It's okay, my love. We will find another way." And we found it. The orphanage was on the outskirts of the city, an old building with white walls and a courtyard full of trees. We went there with open hearts, ready to give a home to a child in need. And then I saw him. Daniel was 2 years old. He was small, thin, with huge black eyes that seemed to have seen too much for his short age. His biological parents had died in a car accident 6 months earlier, and since then he hadn't stopped crying. The nuns warned us, "This child is traumatized. He doesn't let anyone touch him. He screams every time someone gets close." But when I knelt in front of him and reached out my hand, something changed. He stared at me for a long moment, and then slowly, very slowly, he put his small hand on mine. That was the moment I became a mother. The first months were difficult. Daniel had nightmares every night. He woke up screaming, looking for parents who would never return. I stayed with him until dawn, singing lullabies, stroking his hair, promising I would never abandon him. And one night, after 3 months of infinite patience, Daniel looked at me with those huge eyes and said a word that changed my life forever. Mom. I cried for hours, from happiness, from relief, from love. My son. My little Daniel. Finally, he was mine. The memory faded when I saw the exit sign toward their town. I shook my head to clear my mind and took the exit. Daniel's house was in a quiet subdivision on the outskirts, a 2-story house with a garden and garage, and a mortgage that I knew they struggled to pay every month. Daniel worked as an accountant at a firm in the city, and Rachel taught at a public school. They weren't rich, but they lived comfortably, or so I thought. I parked in front of the house and got out of the car with the box of chocolates in my hands. My heart was beating fast. I was nervous like always when I came here. I never knew how Rachel would receive me. I rang the doorbell. Footsteps, the sound of the lock, and then the door opened. Rachel was there with her usual fake smile. That smile that never reached her eyes. That screamed contempt even though her lips tried to feign politeness. "Hi, mother-in-law. What brings you here?" Her tone was condescending, as if I were an annoying door-to-door salesman and not the grandmother of her children. "Hi, Rachel. Daniel sent me these chocolates for my birthday, and I wanted to share them with you and the kids." I handed her the box. For a moment, I saw something strange in her eyes. Surprise? Fear? It was just an instant. So brief that I thought I had imagined it. But now looking back, I know it wasn't my imagination. Rachel knew something. Rachel always knew something. "What a nice detail from Daniel," she muttered, taking the box. "The kids will be delighted." I waited for her to invite me in. She didn't. "Are the kids home?" I asked, trying to hide my disappointment. I would like to see them. They are napping. It has been a long day. Maybe another day would be better. There was always an excuse, always a reason to keep me at the door, to not let me enter my son's life. Sure, I said, forcing a smile. Another day. I turned around and walked toward the car. Before getting in, I looked toward the house one last time. And then I noticed it. There was an unknown car parked next to the garage, a black BMW with city plates. Visitors at nap time? I shook my head. I was being paranoid. Probably a neighbor or a friend of Daniel. I got in the car and started the drive back to the city. I didn't know I had just saved my life. I didn't know the chocolates I had gifted with so much love contained enough arsenic to kill an adult. I didn't know that my son, my little Daniel, the boy who called me mom for the first time 40 years ago, had sent me death wrapped in gold paper. I arrived at my apartment when the sun was starting to set. The sky had turned orange and pink, one of those sunsets that make you forget the day's problems. I had a light dinner, a salad, a little bread, a glass of wine. I sat in front of the TV to watch the news, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about Daniel and the card, about how maybe things were starting to change between us. Maybe Rachel has finally understood that I am not her enemy, I thought. Maybe my son has decided that his mother still matters. How naive I was. I went to bed early, around 10. Before sleeping, I prayed as I did every night. I prayed for Michael to be at peace. I prayed for Daniel and Rachel and the kids to be happy. I prayed for myself so God would give me strength to face another day. That night, I slept peacefully. It was the last night of peace I would have in a long time. The phone rang at 6 in the morning. I woke up startled with my heart racing. Calls at those hours never bring good news. My first thought was my sister's or some family emergency. I took the phone with trembling hands. On the screen, a name was shining. Daniel. Hello? Mom. My son's voice sounded strange, tense, nothing like his usual tone. Did you eat the chocolates? The question caught me off guard. What? Daniel, it's 6 in the morning. Answer me, he shouted, and for the first time in my life, I felt afraid of my own son. Did you eat the chocolates or not? No, I haven't eaten them. I gave them to Rachel and the kids yesterday. I thought they would like them more than me. Silence. A long, heavy silence that stretched for what seemed like hours, but was probably only seconds. You did what? Daniel's voice was no longer tense. It was pure panic. The kids ate the chocolates, Daniel? I don't understand. What is happening? Why do you care so much if I ate the chocolates or not? More silence. And then, you are an idiot. You are a damn idiot. And he hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, trembling. My son had just called me an idiot. My son whom I had raised with all my love, whom I had given everything I had. He had just insulted me for not eating some chocolates. Something was very wrong. I tried to call him back, but he didn't answer. Once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen to make coffee. I needed to calm down, think clearly. Maybe Daniel was stressed about work. Maybe he had a bad night. Maybe everything had a logical explanation. But deep down, something told me that wasn't the case. Something told me the nightmare had just begun. The second call came 2 hours later. This time it was Rachel. Her voice sounded different. It wasn't the cold and distant Rachel of always. This Rachel was scared. Mother-in-law, the kids, hospital. The words came out broken, mixed with sobs. What happened? I asked, feeling panic take over me. Rachel, what happened to the kids? The chocolates? Lily and Jack ate chocolates last night. Early this morning they started vomiting, having seizures. We took them to the emergency room. The world began to spin around me. Where are you? Which hospital? Mercy General Hospital. The doctors say. They say it's poisoning, that there was something in the chocolates. I didn't hear the rest. The phone fell from my hands. Poisoning. The chocolates Daniel had gifted me. The chocolates I had given to my grandchildren. My God, I whispered. My God, what have I done? I don't remember the drive well. I know I drove too fast, that I almost ran 2 red lights, that my hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the steering wheel. In my head, the pieces were starting to fit together, although my heart refused to accept what my mind already knew. Daniel's reaction when he knew I hadn't eaten the chocolates, his panic upon learning the kids had eaten them, his specific, urgent, desperate questions. No, I told myself, it cannot be. Daniel wouldn't be capable. He is my son. He loves me. But the doubt had already taken root. I arrived at the hospital at 10 in the morning. I parked badly. I didn't care. I ran toward the emergency room with my heart in my throat. Rachel was in the waiting room sitting on a plastic chair with her face buried in her hands. When she saw me arrive, she raised her head. Her eyes were red from crying, her makeup ruined, her hair messy. For the first time since I met her, I didn't see coldness in her look. I only saw fear. "How are they?" I asked, sitting next to her. "Stable. The doctors say they were lucky. They only ate a few chocolates before going to bed. If they had eaten more—" She didn't finish the sentence. There was no need. "What was in the chocolates?" I asked, although I already sensed the answer. Rachel stared at me and then said a word that changed everything. "Arsenic. Arsenic. A poison. In the chocolates my son had given me for my birthday. The doctor wants to speak with you," said Rachel. "He wants to know where the chocolates came from." I got up with trembling legs and followed a nurse to an office at the end of the hall. There, a man of about 50 in a white coat and grave expression was waiting for me. "Mrs. Watson, I am Dr. Henderson. Please sit down." I sat. The doctor took a seat opposite me and opened a folder. The tests confirmed that the children ingested arsenic. A small amount, thank God, but enough to cause severe symptoms. If they had eaten more chocolates or if they were smaller— He shook his head. "I don't even want to think about it." "Will they be okay?" I asked with a threat of a voice. "Yes, they will recover completely, but I need to know. Where did those chocolates come from?" I swallowed hard. The truth burned in my throat. My son Daniel gave them to me for my birthday. The doctor looked at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. "Your son gave you poisoned chocolates?" I didn't. He didn't know. But the words got stuck, because even as I said them, I knew they were a lie. Daniel knew. That's why he called me at 6 a.m. asking if I had eaten them. That's why he panicked when he knew the kids had eaten them. Daniel knew the chocolates were poisoned because he had poisoned them. I left the doctor's office like a sleepwalker. The hospital hallway stretched before me, white and sterile like an endless tunnel. I walked without knowing where I was going, without seeing the people passing by, without hearing the sounds surrounding me. My son had tried to kill me. The boy I rescued from an orphanage, the boy who called me Mom for the first time one night 40 years ago, the boy for whom I sacrificed my youth, my dreams, my savings. That boy had put poison in chocolates and sent them to me as a birthday gift. I stopped by a window and looked outside. The sky was an intense blue, indifferent to my pain. Life went on, cars driving, people walking, the world turning as if nothing had happened. But my world had stopped. Mother-in-law. I turned around. Rachel was behind me with her arms crossed over her chest and an expression I had never seen on her, fear mixed with determination. "We need to talk," she said. I followed her to a small empty chapel at the end of the hall. Rachel closed the door and sat on one of the wooden benches. I sat opposite her. "Rachel, what is happening?" I asked. "What do you know that I don't know?" She remained silent for a long moment. Then she began to speak. "6 months ago, I heard a phone conversation of Daniel's. He was in his office with the door ajar. I shouldn't have listened, but—" She bit her lip. "He was talking to someone about you, about your money." "My money?" $200,000. Daniel discovered that you have $200,000 in the bank. When you were sick last year and Daniel had to help you with the insurance paperwork, he saw the bank statements. I felt a chill run down my back. "And what exactly did he say?" Rachel looked down. He said, "The old woman is sitting on $200,000 and won't let go of a dime. How much longer is she going to live? That money should be mine." The words fell on me like physical blows. "But that doesn't mean—" I started to say. "There is more." Rachel interrupted me, raising her hand. "A few weeks ago, Daniel told me he wanted to send you a special birthday gift, chocolates from an expensive shop. I asked him why after years without giving you anything, and he told me it was time to repair the relationship. And what is wrong with that? Except that yesterday when you came to bring the chocolates, Daniel wasn't working as he had told me. He was home, hiding in the bedroom. I saw his car parked in the back garage, the black BMW, the car I had seen yesterday and didn't recognize. Why would he hide from me? I don't know. But when you left and I opened the box of chocolates, Daniel appeared suddenly. He snatched the box from my hands and told me he wanted to be the first to try them. But then his phone rang and he had to take an urgent call. He left the box in the kitchen and went to the office. And the kids, Lily and Jack, went into the kitchen while I was making dinner. They saw the chocolates and asked for one. I told them yes, that they could eat a few before dinner. Rachel's voice broke. I didn't think. I didn't imagine. It's not your fault, I said automatically, although my mind was processing something much more terrible. Daniel had tried to prevent Rachel and the kids from eating the chocolates because he knew they were poisoned, because he had poisoned them specifically for me. Mother-in-law said Rachel looking me directly in the eyes. I think those chocolates weren't meant to be shared. I think they were meant for you. Only for you. She said it out loud, what I already knew but refused to accept. My son had tried to murder me. No. At that moment, the chapel door burst open. Daniel was there in the doorway with a pale face and wild eyes. He hadn't slept all night, that was evident. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair messy. His general appearance was that of a man on the verge of collapse. But he didn't go toward the kids. He didn't ask about their health. He didn't run to hug his wife. He came directly toward me. Mom, he gasped. Did you eat any chocolates? Are you sure you didn't taste even one? And in that instant, seeing him there in front of me with panic etched in every line of his face, I knew with absolute certainty. My son wasn't worried about me. He was worried about himself. He was worried because his plan had failed. I didn't answer, and my voice sounded strange even to me. Cold, distant, as if it belonged to someone else. I didn't eat any. Relief crossed his face for a moment, only a moment. Then it was replaced by something else. Frustration. Contained rage. Why did you give them away? He asked, and there was an accusation in his tone. They were for you. I gave them to you. Because I always think of others before myself, I replied. Because I am an idiot, just like you said this morning. Daniel froze. What did you say? I got up from the bench. Suddenly, I didn't feel weak or confused anymore. I felt something completely different. An icy clarity that allowed me to see everything with perfect sharpness. You knew, I said, staring at him. You knew the chocolates were poisoned. Mom, you are delirious. That's why you called me at 6 a.m. asking if I had eaten them. That's why you panicked when I told you I gave them to the kids. I took a step toward him. That's why you hid yesterday when I came to the house. You didn't want to see me. You didn't want to look me in the eyes knowing what you had done. Mom, stop! Shouted Daniel, backing away. You don't know what you are saying. I know exactly what I am saying. I got closer. I could smell his fear, see it in the shaking of his hands and the sweat on his forehead. You sent me chocolates poisoned with arsenic, I said, pronouncing every word clearly. You wanted me to eat them and die. You wanted it to look like a heart attack. Poor Grandma Emily, so old it was a matter of time. And then you would inherit my $200,000. Daniel opened his mouth to deny, to lie, to manipulate as he had done all his life. But before he could speak, Rachel intervened. Daniel, she said, and her voice was steel. The doctors found arsenic in our children's blood. If you don't tell the truth, I am going to call the police right now. The silence that followed was absolute. Daniel looked at both of us, at his mother, whom he had tried to murder, and at his wife, the mother of the children he had almost killed by accident. And then his mask fell. You want the truth? He said, and his voice was no longer pleading or terrified. It was bitter, resentful, full of hatred that had been boiling for years. Well, here it is. He dropped onto one of the chapel benches, as if his legs no longer held him. Yes, I poisoned the chocolates. Yes, I wanted you to eat them and die. He looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Do you know why, Mom? Because you have been a burden for 40 years. The words hit me like punches. A burden, always giving, always sacrificing, always reminding me of everything you did for me. You adopted me when no one wanted me. You gave me a family. You gave me love. Do you know what it feels like to grow up with that debt on your shoulders, knowing that you will never, ever be able to repay it? Daniel. I never asked for anything in return. Exactly, he shouted, standing up abruptly. You never asked for anything, but you expected everything. You expected me to be the perfect son who visited you every week, called you every day, thanked you eternally for saving me. Rachel was pale and motionless, listening to her husband's confession, as if it were a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. And then there is the money, continued Daniel, pacing from one side to the other like a caged animal. $200,000. $200,000 that you have accumulated, living like a miser, eating leftovers, wearing clothes from 20 years ago. All that money will be mine when you die. But when are you going to die, Mom? You are 69 years old and healthier than me. You could live another 20 years. So you decided to speed things up, I said, and my voice sounded hollow. I needed that money now, he exploded. I have debts, Mom. Debts you can't even imagine, dangerous people who threaten to kill me if I don't pay. And you are sitting there on a fortune refusing to help your own son. You never told me you owed so much. I asked for $20,000 last year. You told me no. Because I knew you would use them to gamble, I replied. And the truth of those words surprised even me. On some level, I had always known Daniel had a gambling problem. I had simply refused to see it. So what? Is it your money or my inheritance? Because according to the law, when you die, all that will be mine. I just moved up the timeline. You moved up the timeline by killing me. It was going to be painless, he shouted, and there was a note of justification in his voice that froze my blood. Arsenic in those doses causes a cardiac arrest. You would have died in your sleep without suffering. No one would have suspected anything. And the kids intervened. Rachel, her voice trembling with fury. You thought about the kids when you poisoned those chocolates. Daniel turned to her as if he had forgotten she was there. The kids weren't supposed to eat anything. They were for her. Only for her. He pointed at me with an accusing finger. If this stupid old woman had eaten the chocolates like a normal person, none of this would have happened. Stupid old woman. The words echoed in the small chapel. I looked at my son, the boy I had saved, the man I had raised, and I saw a stranger. A stranger who hated me, who despised me, who had planned my death with the same coldness with which one plans a business trip. Why? I asked, and my voice broke for the first time. Daniel, why do you hate me so much? He looked at me, and for a moment I saw something beneath the rage, something ancient and wounded. Because I was never really your son, he said. I was your charity project, your good deed, the orphan you rescued to feel better about yourself. Dad never accepted me. He always looked at me like a stranger. And you loved me so much you suffocated me. Your love was a prison, Mom, a prison from which I could never escape. Tears ran down my cheeks. I loved you with all my heart, I know, said Daniel, and for the first time he sounded tired instead of furious. I know, and that is the worst of all. You loved me so much, you turned me into this. The silence that followed Daniel's confession was the longest of my life. We stood there, the three of us, in that small hospital chapel, while my son's words floated between us like poisonous smoke. I was the one who spoke first. I am going to call the police. Daniel raised his head sharply. You can't do that. I am your son. You are the man who tried to kill me. You are the man who almost killed his own children. My voice was firm, although inside I was crumbling. I am not going to leave you free to try again. Mom, we can fix this between us. I will pay back the money. I will seek help. I will go to therapy. With what money? Asked Rachel, and her tone was icy. According to you, you owe thousands of dollars to dangerous people. Where are you going to get money to pay anything back? Daniel looked at her with pleading eyes. Rachel, my love, you understand me. I was desperate. I had no other choice. You had many choices. She cut him off. You could have been honest with me about the debts. You could have sought professional help. You could have talked to your mother and asked for a loan, but you chose to poison her. She got up from the bench. I am going to see the kids, and when I leave this chapel, I am going to call my lawyer to start the divorce proceedings. Rachel, you can't do this to me. It is already done, Daniel. She stopped at the door and looked at him one last time. I wanted to believe you were a good man. I wanted to believe you had problems, but deep down you were a good person. But a good man doesn't try to kill his mother. A good man doesn't endanger his children for money. And she left, leaving us alone. Daniel collapsed on the bench with his head in his hands. Mom, he sobbed, please, don't do this to me. Don't call the police. I will go to jail. They will destroy my life. I approached him slowly. I sat next to him, as I had done so many times when he was a child, and cried from a nightmare. Daniel, I said softly, your life is already destroyed. You destroyed it yourself. He raised his head. His eyes were red, his face soaked in tears. I was so scared, Mom. The men I owe money to are really bad. They came to the house. They threatened to hurt Rachel and the kids if I didn't pay. I was desperate. You could have told me. I couldn't. How was I going to tell you that your son was a gambler who owed $80,000 to mobsters? How was I going to admit that I had stolen from my own company, that I had mortgaged the house without telling Rachel that I had emptied the kids' savings accounts? I stared at him. You stole from your company and mortgaged the house? Daniel nodded miserably. I did everything wrong, Mom. Everything. And when I saw your bank statements and knew you had $200,000, I thought it was the solution. I thought if I inherited that money, I could pay the debts, save the job, save the marriage. By killing me. In my head, it made sense. He laughed bitterly. It sounds crazy now, right? But in that moment, it was the only way out I saw. We stayed in silence for a moment, then I asked him what I needed to know. How long were you planning it? 6 months, he admitted. I researched poison. Ways to make it look natural. Arsenic seemed perfect. Symptoms similar to a heart attack, difficult to detect if you don't look specifically. I bought the most expensive chocolates I found, thinking the strong chocolate would hide any strange taste. 6 months. My son had spent 6 months planning how to murder me. And Jessica? I asked. Daniel froze. How do you know about Jessica? I didn't know until now, but your reaction just confirmed it. I looked at him with eyes that no longer recognized the child I had raised. Who is Jessica? He lowered his gaze. A woman I met at the casino. She works there. We've been together for 2 years. 2 years. While I prayed every night for the happiness of his marriage, he had a mistress. Did she know about the chocolates? Daniel hesitated. That hesitation was enough of an answer. It was her idea, wasn't it? I said. No, it wasn't exactly her idea, but when I told her about the money and how desperate I was, she said sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. And I understood what she meant. She is pregnant. Daniel looked at me with surprise. How? I didn't know, but now I do. He nodded slowly. 4 months. We are going to have a son. That's why I needed the money more than ever. I wanted to start a new life with her away from all the lies. A new life built on my corpse. Daniel said nothing. There was nothing to say. I got up from the bench. My legs were shaking, but my decision was firm. Daniel, I am going to walk out of this chapel. I am going to call the police. I am going to tell them everything you told me, and then I will never see you again. Mom, please, don't call me Mom. The words came out harder than I intended, but I didn't regret them. A son doesn't try to kill his mother. A son doesn't spend 6 months planning the murder of the woman who gave him everything. You are not my son. You are a stranger who has been using my last name for 40 years. I walked toward the door. Daniel got up, stumbling, and tried to grab my arm. Please, I beg you. I will do whatever you want. I will turn myself in. But don't abandon me like this. I stopped. I looked at him one last time. I abandoned you a long time ago, Daniel. It's just that neither of us knew it until today. And I left the chapel, leaving behind the son I had loved for 40 years, leaving behind the lie of a lifetime. The hours that followed were a blur of chaos. The police arrived at the hospital 20 minutes after my call. 2 uniformed officers and a plainclothes inspector who introduced himself as Detective Miller. I told them everything. The box of chocolates, Daniel's call at 6 in the morning, his confession in the chapel. Rachel corroborated my version and added details I didn't know. The suspicious conversations she had heard, Daniel's erratic behavior in recent months, the money problems he had hidden. Daniel was arrested that same afternoon. I saw him as they took him away in handcuffs down the hospital hallway. Our eyes met for a moment. In his eyes, there was no longer rage or justifications, only emptiness. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel justice. I only felt a deep pain, as if something vital had been ripped from my chest. That night, I returned to my apartment. Rachel stayed at the hospital with the kids who were still under observation, but were already out of danger. The apartment was exactly as I had left it. The coffee cup in the sink, the curtains half drawn, the blanket folded on the sofa. 24 hours earlier, I had left here happy because my son had given me chocolates. Now I returned knowing those chocolates contained my death sentence. I sat on the sofa without turning on the lights. The darkness wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. And then finally I cried. I cried for the 2-year-old boy I had found in an orphanage, for the boy who called me mom for the first time, for the teenager who made me laugh with his bad jokes, for the young man who promised he would always take care of me. I cried for the man he had become, for the stranger who had planned my death for 6 months, for the monster I had created without realizing it. And I cried for myself, for the 40 years I had dedicated to loving someone who saw me as an obstacle, for the sacrifices I had made thinking I was building something beautiful, when in reality I was only feeding a snake. I didn't sleep that night, nor the next, nor the one after. I sat on the sofa staring at the wall, reliving every moment of the last 40 years, looking for signs I had ignored, moments where I could have acted differently. Was it when I forgave him for stealing money from my wallet at 15? Was it when I paid off his college debts without asking questions? Was it when I kept calling him every week even though he never returned my calls? When exactly had I started raising a killer? On the 3rd day, someone knocked on the door. I got up with difficulty. I hadn't showered. I hadn't eaten more than a few crackers. I hadn't spoken to anyone except the police. I opened the door. A man of about 55 was there. Tall, gray-haired, with an elegant gray suit and kind eyes. Emily. I am Robert. I was Michael's friend, Robert. The name sounded familiar. Michael had mentioned him many times, his college buddy, the one who became a lawyer, the one who always said he owed him his life for helping him pass Roman law. I heard what happened, said Robert. It was on the news. Son attempts to poison mother for inheritance. I came as soon as I could. I stepped aside to let him in. We entered the living room with the closed curtains and the smell of abandonment. Robert looked around without saying anything. Then he turned to me. Emily, you can't stay here sinking into the darkness. Michael wouldn't want that. Michael is dead, I replied, and my voice sounded hollow. And the son we raised tried to kill me. I know, and I am deeply sorry. He sat on the sofa and signaled me to do the same. But now you have a choice. You can let yourself die of sadness inside here, or you can fight. Fight? Against whom? Against my own son. Against injustice. Against the man who tried to murder you. Robert leaned forward. Daniel will have a trial. And from what my contacts in the DA's office have told me, he has hired one of the best criminal lawyers in the state, James Miller. Does the name ring a bell? I shook my head. Miller is known as the liberator of demons. He specializes in getting guilty people out of jail. He has gotten acquittals in cases that seemed impossible. Robert stared at me. Daniel is going to fight for his freedom. And if you don't have someone fighting for you, he could win. Win. But he confessed. The doctors found arsenic. Confessions can be retracted. Evidence can be questioned. Miller is already building a defense. He says Daniel didn't know the chocolates were poisoned. He says it was his mistress, that Jessica woman, who did it without him knowing. My stomach turned. That is a lie. You and I know it. But in a court, the truth doesn't always win. The one who presents it best wins. I remained silent, processing his words. What do you propose? I finally asked. Robert took a card out of his pocket. Let me help you. I am a lawyer, although my specialty is civil law, not criminal. But I have contacts. I can coordinate your defense, ensure Daniel pays for what he did. Why? I asked. You barely know me. Why would you want to help me? Robert smiled sadly. Because I owe it to Michael. Before he died, he made me promise I would take care of you if you ever needed it. His voice softened. It has taken me 15 years to keep that promise. Better late than never. Tears returned to my eyes, but this time they weren't just from sadness. They were from something I had forgotten existed. Hope. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Robert took the reins of my case with an efficiency that amazed me. He hired a private investigator named Ralph, a former city cop with a reputation for finding what others couldn't. He contacted the prosecutor's office to ensure my testimony was taken into account, and he helped me organize my finances to protect them from any claim Daniel might make. Because it turns out my son hadn't just planned to kill me. He had also tried to access my bank accounts using forged documents. The bank had detected it in time, but the attempt was recorded. Another charge for the list said Robert when I told him. Attempted fraud. Ralph the investigator visited me every few days with new reports. What he discovered about Daniel was worse than I had imagined. The gambling debts amounted to $80,000. He owed money to legal casinos, to online betting sites, and worst of all, to a group of illegal loan sharks known as the Brothers, with connections in the city. He had been stealing from his company for 3 years, small amounts at first, then larger sums. The total exceeded $50,000. His boss didn't know yet, but it was a matter of time. And then there was Jessica. Jessica, born Lucia, 28 years old, employee at the Grand Casino. They had been in a relationship for 2 years. She was 4 months pregnant, and according to text messages Ralph had managed to obtain, she had been an active accomplice in the plan to poison me. You just have to make sure she eats them, said a message from Jessica to Daniel. After that, everything will be ours. And if something goes wrong, Daniel responded, nothing will go wrong. Old people die all the time. No one will suspect. I read those messages with trembling hands. Old people die all the time. That's how they saw me. As an obstacle to eliminate, not as a person. This is enough to sink both of them, said Ralph. But we need more. We need Jessica to testify against Daniel. How if she is as guilty as him? Exactly. But if we offer her a deal, less jail time in exchange for her testimony? Ralph shrugged. It wouldn't be the first time an accomplice betrays her partner to save her own skin. The idea made my stomach churn, but Robert was right. This was a war, and in a war, sometimes you have to make uncomfortable alliances. Meanwhile, my life began to change in other ways. Rachel and the kids moved temporarily into my apartment. Their house was foreclosed. Daniel had stopped paying the mortgage months ago without telling her, and they had nowhere to go. The first nights were uncomfortable. Rachel and I had never been friends. There had always been tension between us, silent resentments, unspoken words. But sharing a small space, taking care of the kids together, facing the same tragedy together, all that united us in unexpected ways. One night, after putting Lily and Jack to bed, Rachel and I sat in the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. Mother-in-law, she said, breaking a long silence. I want to apologize. I looked at her, surprised. Apologize for what? For how I treated you all these years? She looked down, ashamed. I was always cold to you. I kept you away from the kids. I made you feel like an intruder in your own family. Rachel, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She looked me in the eyes. The truth is, I was jealous of you, of how much Daniel loved you or how much I thought he loved you. Every time he talked about you, about what a good mother you had been, about how much he owed you, I felt I would never measure up. I didn't know you felt that way. I never said it. I preferred to turn you into my enemy instead of facing my own insecurities. She sighed. And now I discover that the man for whom I pushed you away was worth nothing, that he was willing to kill you for money, that he lied to me every day while sleeping with another woman. I took her hand. It's not your fault. He deceived us both, but you tried to warn me." Tears ran down her cheeks. "Do you remember that time 3 years ago when I told you Daniel seemed distracted, that maybe you should talk to him about what was worrying him? I remembered it vaguely." "I ignored you," continued Rachel. "I thought you were meddling where you weren't called, but you were right. Something was very wrong and I didn't want to see it." We remained silent for a moment. Then I said, "Rachel, we can't change the past, but we can decide what the future will be." I squeezed her hand. "You have 2 wonderful children who need you. I have 2 grandchildren who are the light of my life. Why don't we start over, not as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, as family?" Rachel looked at me with wet eyes. "I would like that," she said. "I would like that very much." And so from the ashes of a tragedy, something unexpected was born, an alliance between 2 women who had been deceived by the same man, a friendship built on shared pain. 2 months passed. Daniel was still in pretrial detention awaiting trial. His lawyer, James Miller, had tried to get him released on bail, but the judge denied it, considering the flight risk. Jessica had also been arrested after fleeing to Mexico. The police found her trying to cross the border with a fake passport. Now she was in a women's prison, waiting to be extradited. Ralph kept digging up secrets, and what he found in those 2 months was devastating. One afternoon, he arrived at my apartment with a thick folder under his arm. "Emily," he said, sitting on the sofa, "I have to tell you something difficult. More difficult than discovering my son tried to kill me? Different." He opened the folder. "I have been investigating Daniel's background, not just his finances, but his history. His past." "What did you find, Ralph?" He took out a yellowish document that looked decades old. "This is from the orphanage in the city, Daniel's admission record." I looked at the document. It was dated 1985, the year we adopted Daniel. And what is special about it? Read the family history section. I took the document and looked for the section Ralph pointed out. What I read left me frozen. Biological parents Mary and Joseph Smith, deceased in traffic accident March 14, 1985. Social worker's note. Continuous psychological evaluation is recommended due to history of mental instability in the maternal family. The minor's grandmother was committed to a psychiatric institution in 1970 with a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder. Daniel's grandmother had an antisocial disorder. "This doesn't mean anything," I said, although my voice was trembling. "Mental disorders aren't hereditary in that way." "Not always," agreed Ralph. "But there are genetic predispositions. And if you add early trauma, like losing your parents at 2 years old," he left the sentence unfinished. "Are you saying Daniel was predestined to be like this?" "I am saying he had risk factors that no one identified or treated." Ralph looked at me with compassion. "Emily, I am not justifying what he did. Nothing justifies trying to kill your own mother, but I wanted you to know that this isn't completely your fault. Daniel had problems that went beyond how you raised him." I didn't know how to feel about that information. Relief? Guilt? More pain? Why did no one tell us this when we adopted him? In the 80s, these records weren't shared with adoptive families. It was considered better to start from zero. Give the child a chance without the stigma of his past. Ralph shook his head. It was a mistake. If you had known, you could have sought professional help from the beginning. I thought of all the times Daniel had shown signs that something wasn't right. The teenage thefts, the constant lies, the inability to maintain lasting friendships, the emotional coldness he sometimes showed even with me. I had always justified it. It's the trauma of losing his parents, I told myself. He will get over it, I thought. With enough love, he will heal. But love doesn't cure everything. Love doesn't substitute professional therapy. Love cannot undo a genetic predisposition combined with childhood trauma. It could have been different. If we had known from the beginning, if we had sought help, if we had, the ifs were infinite, and none would change the present. That same week, I received another unexpected news. My sister Susan, who lived in another state, had been paying for Daniel's legal defense. Robert told me with a grave expression. Susan. I couldn't believe it. My own sister sold her condo to gather the money. $100,000. She gave them to Daniel's lawyer as a guarantee for a new bail petition. But the judge already denied bail. Miller is going to present a new request with proof of family ties and community support. Susan has signed a statement saying Daniel can live with her while he waits for the trial. The floor seemed to open under my feet. My sister, my little Susan, whom I had taken care of all my life, whom I had protected from our alcoholic father, whom I had helped pay for college. My sister was on the side of the man who had tried to kill me. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. Emily. I knew you would call. Why Susan? My voice trembled with rage and pain. Why are you helping the man who wanted to murder me? Because he is your son, she replied as if it were the most obvious explanation in the world. Because family is not abandoned no matter what happens. He tried to kill me. He put poison in chocolates. He was desperate, Emily. He had debts. He was scared. He wasn't thinking clearly. Her voice softened. You were always too hard on him, always expecting perfection, always reminding him of everything you did for him. Have you not asked yourself if maybe you pushed him to this? The words hit me like a punch. Are you blaming me? I am saying Daniel is not a monster. He is a sick man who needs help, not a jail cell. Susan sighed. Look, I know you are hurt. You have the right to be. But destroying your own son won't bring you peace. Susan listened to me well. My voice was ice. Daniel is not sick. He is a criminal. He planned my death for 6 months. He researched poisons, bought the arsenic, calculated the dose. That is not desperation. It is premeditation. You always see everything in black and white, Emily. It has always been like that. And you have always been blind to Daniel's flaws. You always justified him, always protected him from the consequences of his actions. I took a deep breath, but this time I am not going to let it pass. This time he is going to pay for what he did. If you go ahead with this, said Susan, and her voice hardened, you will lose something more than a son. You will lose me too. If I have to choose between my life and your approval, the choice is easy. I hung up before she could answer. I stared at the phone for a long while, feeling another piece of my world crumbling. My son wanted to kill me. My sister supported him. Who else would betray me before this was over? 3 weeks later, Robert called me first thing in the morning. Emily, we have a chance. Jessica has accepted to testify against Daniel in exchange for a reduced sentence. The DA has her full statement, and there is something else. She recorded conversations with Daniel, conversations where he admits everything. My heart skipped a beat. Recorded audio. Jessica was afraid Daniel would betray her if something went wrong, so she protected herself. There are conversations about the plan, about the arsenic, about how they were going to spend the money after your death. Robert paused. It is damning, Emily. With this, Daniel has no escape. I should have felt relieved, triumphant, but the only thing I felt was an immense emptiness. When is the trial? A date has been set for 2 weeks from now. But before? Robert hesitated. Daniel wants to see you. What? He requested a visit? He says he needs to speak with you before the trial. Robert's voice became cautious. You have no obligation to go, but if you decide to do it, it could be useful. Useful? If we get him to admit something else in person, something that isn't in Jessica's recordings, we would have an even more solid case. I understood what he was asking me. Do you want me to record him? I want to give you the option. Robert sighed. I know it is a lot to ask, but this man tried to kill you, Emily. If there is any way to ensure he pays completely. I remained silent, thinking. Go see Daniel. Look him in the eyes. Listen to what he had to say. Record him without him knowing. It was manipulative. It was cold. It was exactly what he had done to me. I will do it, I said, but not for the case. I will do it because I need to understand. I need to hear him say the truth, face to face, without excuses. The county jail was on the outskirts of the city, a gray and gloomy building that seemed to absorb the sunlight. Robert accompanied me to the door, but couldn't enter the visit with me. The recording device is in your purse, he told me in a low voice. You just have to leave it on. It will record everything automatically. I nodded. My hands were cold, my stomach turned. Robert, what if I can't do it? What if I see him and crumble? You won't crumble." He put a hand on my shoulder. "You are stronger than you think, Emily. Michael always said it. My Emily seems soft on the outside, but inside she is made of steel." I smiled despite the fear. Michael exaggerated. "Michael knew you better than anyone." I took a deep breath and entered the jail. The visiting room was small and cold, with a metal table in the center and 2 chairs on each side. A guard signaled me to wait while they brought the prisoner. I sat with my purse on my knees, feeling the weight of the recording device as if it were a bomb about to explode. 5 minutes, 10, 15. And then the door opened. Daniel entered handcuffed, accompanied by 2 guards. He had lost weight since the last time I saw him. His face was gaunt with deep circles under his eyes and a careless beard I had never seen on him before. He sat opposite me. The guards retreated to the corner of the room but remained inside. We looked at each other in silence for a long moment. "Mom," he said finally, and his voice broke. "You came? You said you wanted to talk. Here I am. I thought you wouldn't come. After everything that... I also thought I wouldn't come." I interrupted him. "But it turns out I have questions. Questions that only you can answer." Daniel looked down. "Ask. I will tell you everything you want to know. Why?" He raised his head, confused. "Why what? Why me?" The words came out loaded with pain. "Of all the people in the world you could have stolen from, cheated, used. Why your own mother, Daniel?" He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was something different in them. Not the rage of the confession in the hospital, not the panic of the arrest. Something deeper. "Because you were the only one who would always be there," he said. "The only one who would never abandon me no matter what happened. The only one I could fail again and again. And who would keep loving me? That makes no sense. It makes all the sense." He leaned forward. "Mom, do you know what the worst part of being adopted is? It isn't not knowing your biological parents. It isn't feeling different. The worst part is the debt. The debt. You saved me. You gave me a family, a home, a life. And every day since I have memory, I have felt the weight of that debt on my shoulders." His voice became bitter. "I was never just your son. I was your charity project, your good deed, the proof of how generous and self-sacrificing you were, Daniel." "That is not true." He let out a hollow laugh. "How many times did you tell the story of how you adopted me? To how many people did you tell how difficult it was to raise me, how much you sacrificed, how grateful I should be?" I was left speechless, because he was right. I had told that story hundreds of times. I always thought it was a story of family love, of second chances. I never asked myself how Daniel heard it. Dad Michael never accepted me completely. He continued. He was kind, he played his role. But he never looked at me like a father looks at a son. He looked at me like someone looking at a guest who has stayed too long. "Michael loved you. Michael loved you. And he tolerated me because I came in the package." Daniel shrugged. "I don't blame him. I wasn't his son. We didn't share blood. Why would he love me like a son?" The pain in his voice was real. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't an excuse. It was truth. And that truth broke my heart. "Daniel," I said, and my voice trembled. "I loved you. I loved you from the moment I saw you in that orphanage. You were my son in everything that mattered. I know." He nodded. "I know, Mom. And that is the problem. You loved me too much. You loved me so much you suffocated me. Every time I failed there, you were to fix it. Every time I messed up there, you were to excuse me. You never let me face the consequences of my actions, because it was my job to protect you." "No, Mom. Your job was to prepare me for the real world, and you didn't do it." He ran his handcuffed hands through his hair. "I grew up believing there would always be someone to save me, that the rules didn't apply to me, that my actions didn't have consequences. And when I finally found myself in a hole I couldn't get out of, you decided to kill me. I decided to take what I believed was rightfully mine." He looked straight at me. "That money, Mom. In my twisted mind, it was already mine. You were just delaying the inevitable, and I was just an obstacle. Yes, The word fell between us like a stone. In that moment, that was all you were. An obstacle between me and my survival. The silence stretched, and then I asked what I really needed to know. If I had eaten those chocolates and died, would you have felt anything? Remorse? Guilt? Daniel took a long time to answer. I think so, he said finally. I think a part of me would have died with you. But in that moment, I was so desperate, so terrified that I had disconnected that part. And now his eyes filled with tears. Now that I am here and I have had time to think and I see what I have done. His voice broke. I don't expect you to forgive me, Mom. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I am truly sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I finally understand the monster I became. Tears ran down my cheeks. His too. Two broken people sitting in a cold prison room trying to find meaning in the incomprehensible. Daniel, I said, and my voice was barely a whisper. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I should. What you did, I know, but... I took a deep breath. But I also know that part of this is my fault. I loved you wrong. I protected you from the wrong things. I taught you that love meant giving without limits, when I should have taught you that true love includes boundaries. Mom, you can't blame yourself. I am not taking the blame for what you did. That is yours. But I am taking responsibility for what I did. I stared at him. We were two people who failed each other. I failed you first. You failed me later. And now we are both paying the price. Daniel nodded slowly. What is going to happen now? He asked. You are going to go to trial, probably to prison. There was no point lying to him. The evidence is overwhelming. I know, and I am going to move on. I am going to take care of Rachel and the kids. Rachel will leave you. Rachel is part of my family now, more than you have been in years. The blow landed. I saw him shrink. Take care of Lily and Jack, he said. They are good kids. Don't let them become me. I won't. I got up from the chair. Goodbye, Daniel. Goodbye? His voice was small, scared. Is this it? You won't come back? I looked down at him. The man who had tried to kill me. The boy I had loved for 40 years. I don't know, I said honestly. Today I can't give you more than this. Maybe tomorrow will be different. Maybe it never will be. Mom. Don't call me Mom, Daniel. The words came out softer than I expected. You haven't earned that right back yet. I turned around and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard his voice for the last time. I love you, Mom. Despite everything, I love you. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Robert was waiting for me outside, leaning on the car. How did it go? I handed him the purse with the recording device. You have your confession, I said. Everything you need to sink him. Are you okay? I looked up at the sky. The same blue sky I had seen on my birthday when all this started. No, I responded. But I will be. I got in the car and closed my eyes while Robert drove back to the city. The first chapter of my new life had ended, and although I didn't know what awaited me ahead, I knew one thing for certain. I would never again be the woman I was, the woman who gave without limits, the woman who loved without conditions, the woman who allowed others to use her in the name of love. That woman had died in a hospital chapel in front of her son. The one being born now would be different, stronger, wiser, more alive. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the sofa in my apartment with the lights off and the curtains open, watching the city lights blink in the darkness. From my window, I could see the illuminated streets, the cars passing. The normal life of normal people who hadn't been betrayed by their own children. The recording was in Robert's hands. Daniel's words, his confession, everything would be recorded as evidence. I should feel relieved, victorious even. But the only thing I felt was a void that threatened to swallow me whole. Rachel was in the bedroom with the kids asleep after an exhausting day at the hospital. Lily and Jack had finally been discharged. They were okay. They would survive. But something in their eyes had changed. They had seen their father in handcuffs. They had heard fragments of conversations that no child should hear. How do you explain to an 11-year-old that his father tried to kill his grandmother? How do you tell a 14-year-old girl that the man who tucked her in every night with a kiss was capable of planning a murder? I got up from the sofa and went to the kitchen. I needed to do something with my hands, keep my mind busy. I put water to boil for tea, although I knew I wouldn't drink it. On the counter, my phone vibrated. A message from Susan. Emily, please, we have to talk. I am your sister. I can't believe you hung up on me like that. I ignored it. Then came another. Daniel tells me you went to see him. He says you were very hard on him. He says you don't understand what he is going through. And another one. He has destroyed Emily. He is your son. How can you be so cruel? I turned off the phone. Cruel. The woman who had sold her house to help the man who tried to murder me was calling me cruel. I went back to the sofa. The water in the kitchen started to boil, but I didn't move. The whistling of the kettle filled the apartment until it turned off by itself. When exactly had I lost control of my life? Was it 40 years ago when I decided to adopt a traumatized child without asking for professional help? Was it 15 years ago when Michael died and I was left alone facing an adult Daniel who was already showing signs of trouble? Was it 6 months ago when Daniel started planning my death and I was too blind to see it? Or maybe it was much earlier. Maybe it was the day I decided that my value as a person depended on how much I could give, how much I could sacrifice, how much I could endure. My mother used to say, a good woman is defined by what she does for others. And I spent 69 years trying to be a good woman according to that definition, being a good daughter, good wife, good mother, good sister. And where did that leave me? Alone in a dark apartment with a son in jail for trying to kill me and a sister who blamed me for defending myself. Dawn arrived without me realizing it. The sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating the apartment with a cruel clarity that exposed every crack, every stain, every imperfection. Like my life. Rachel came out of the bedroom at 7, surprised to find me awake. "Mother-in-law, haven't you slept?" I shook my head. I couldn't. Rachel sat next to me on the sofa. She was wearing one of my old nightgowns, too big for her, and she looked so young, so vulnerable. "I didn't sleep much either," she admitted. "The kids had nightmares. Lily woke up crying 3 times. What did you tell her? The truth? Or part of it?" Rachel sighed. I told her that her father had done something very bad, that he had hurt people, and that is why he was in a place where they would help him be better. And she believed it? Lily is smart. Too smart. Rachel looked at me. She asked me if her father loved her, if he had ever really loved her. My heart shrank. What did you answer? I told her yes, that her father loves her, but sometimes sick people do terrible things, even to the people they love. Rachel's voice broke. I don't know if it was the right answer. I don't know how I am supposed to handle this. I took her hand. No one knows how to handle this, Rachel. There is no manual for my husband tried to kill my mother-in-law. She let out a bitter laugh. Do you know what the worst part is? That a part of me still loves him. She looked at me with eyes full of tears. I know he is a monster. I know what he did. But when I think about the early years when we were happy, when he seemed to really love me, a part of me wonders if that person still exists somewhere. Probably, yes, I said. People are rarely completely good or completely bad. Daniel has goodness in him. He just buried it under layers of resentment, addiction, and selfishness. Do you think he can change? The question floated between us. I don't know. I answered honestly, but I know that even if he could change, he doesn't have the right to another chance with me. Some betrayals are too deep to heal. Rachel nodded slowly. I am going to divorce him, she said. I already hired a lawyer. I want the kids and me to start over without the weight of what Daniel did. I support your decision completely. But mother-in-law, Rachel hesitated. The lawyer says the process could be complicated. Daniel is going to try to retain contact with the kids. Legally, as a father, he has rights. The mere idea made my stomach turn. After what he did? After almost killing them? He poisoned them by accident. His target was you. Rachel bit her lip. before the law that could make a difference, especially with a lawyer like James Miller. I got up from the sofa with rage boiling in my chest. Then we will make sure Daniel is convicted for so long that when he gets out, the kids will be adults and can decide for themselves if they want to see him. How? With every weapon we have? Jessica's recordings, my testimony, yesterday's recording, the kids' medical records, everything. I stared at her. Robert is a good lawyer, and I have $200,000 that I am more than willing to spend on making sure justice is served. For the first time in days, Rachel smiled. Then let's fight. Together. 2 days later, Susan appeared at my door. She didn't call before. She didn't warn me. She simply arrived at 9 in the morning, ringing the doorbell insistently until I opened. She was thinner than I remembered, with deep circles under her eyes and uncombed hair. But in her eyes, there was a fierce determination that I recognized immediately. It was the same look I saw in the mirror every morning. "Susan," I said, without moving from the door. "I didn't expect to see you. We need to talk. Now." She tried to enter, but I blocked the way with my body. "I don't think we have anything to talk about. I am your sister, Emily. You can't just erase me from your life because I don't agree with you. I am not erasing you for a disagreement. I am protecting myself from someone who supports my potential killer." Susan shuddered at the word. "Daniel is not a killer. He tried to kill me," I interrupted her, raising my voice. "He put arsenic in chocolates with the specific intention that I die. How would you call it? He was desperate. He had problems you didn't understand, and that justifies murder?" I took a step toward her. "Susan, listen to yourself. You are doing exactly what I did for 40 years, justifying the unjustifiable, finding excuses for inexcusable behaviors. You were always hard on him," snapped Susan. "Always expecting him to be perfect. You never accepted that he was just human. Being human includes having flaws. It doesn't include planning murders." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Susan, you sold your house. Your only house, to pay bail for a man who confessed to poisoning his own mother. At what moment did that seem reasonable to you? Because someone has to believe in him. Someone has to be on his side when everyone abandons him. He put himself in this situation. No one abandoned him. He betrayed us all." Susan shook her head violently. "You don't understand. You were never a biological mother. You don't know what it is to carry a child in your womb and feel that bond." The words hit me like a slap. "Seriously, are you going to play that card?" My voice trembled. "I didn't have biological children, Susan, but I loved Daniel as if he had come out of my own body. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every tear shed for him were as real as if I had birthed him myself. Is it not the same?" "You are right. It is not the same. Because if he had been your biological son, you would have also justified him when he tried to kill you." I looked at her with a mixture of pity and rage. "Do you know what your problem is, Susan? That you never had children. And that is why you idealized Daniel. You turned him into the son you never had, and now you can't accept that he is a criminal." Susan went pale. That was cruel, but true. I began to close the door. "You made your choice, Susan. You chose Daniel over me. Now live with that choice. If you go ahead with the trial, you will destroy our family." I stopped. Susan, the family was destroyed the day Daniel put arsenic in those chocolates. I am just picking up the pieces and deciding what to do with them. I looked at her one last time, and I decided that the pieces that include people who justify attempted murder don't belong in my new life. I closed the door in her face. I heard her screams on the other side, her pleas, her threats. I ignored them all. I leaned against the closed door with my heart racing and my hands shaking. I had lost my son. I had lost my sister. What else was left for me to lose? 1 week later, Robert's call came at 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. "Emily, we have a problem." My stomach contracted. "What kind of problem?" "James Miller is building a defense. He says Daniel didn't know the chocolates were poisoned, that it was Jessica who prepared them without his knowledge. And now Jessica is recanting her testimony. What? How is it possible? Someone pressured her. Someone with resources." Robert paused. "Emily, your sister Susan has access to a lot of money. The world began to spin. She sold her condo. She should have around $100,000. That would explain a lot of things. Miller isn't cheap, and Daniel shouldn't be able to pay him. But if Susan is funding the defense... Robert sighed. This complicates everything. Without Jessica's testimony, our case weakens considerably. But we have the recording of my visit. Daniel confessed. He confessed he made mistakes, that he was desperate. But at no moment did he explicitly admit that he put the arsenic in the chocolates. Robert's voice sounded tired. Miller will argue it was a confession under emotional stress, that Daniel was confused, that he assumed responsibility for something he didn't do. Are you saying he could get away with it? I am saying we need to prepare for a much longer and more complicated battle than I thought. The trial could last months, and there is no guarantee of victory. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. Months of trials. Months of seeing Daniel in court. Months of lawyers tearing apart my life, my character, my version of events. Months of reliving the worst moment of my life again and again. Did I have the strength for that? That night, I found myself walking through the streets of the city without a clear destination. I ended up on a bridge overlooking the river. I leaned on the stone railing and looked down at the water flowing dark and silent. The city blinked around me, but I felt disconnected from everything, as if I were watching the world from behind glass. What was the point of keep fighting? Daniel had a brilliant lawyer. Susan was funding him. Jessica had recanted, and I was just a 69-year-old woman who would probably be destroyed on a stand by a man who made a living defending criminals. The water below looked black, deep. It promised a quick end to all this pain. Ma'am. I turned around. A young woman of about 20 was standing a few feet away. She was wearing hospital scrubs under a light jacket and a worried expression on her face. Are you okay? She asked, approaching carefully. I am fine, I lied, just admiring the view. At 11 at night on a bridge in the middle of winter? The young woman got closer. Ma'am, I work at the city hospital. I am a nurse, and I have seen that look before. What look? The look of someone who is considering if it is worth it to keep going. Tears welled up without me being able to control them. You don't know me. You don't know what I'm going through. You are right, I don't know. The young woman leaned on the railing next to me. But I know how it feels to think that the pain will never end, that there is no way out, that it would be easier to simply give up. And how do you know? Because 5 years ago, I was where you are now on a bridge looking down, thinking that jumping would be the solution. I looked at her really for the first time. She was pretty with dark eyes and a sad smile. What stopped you? An old woman like you. She smiled. She came over and asked me if I had a cigarette. I told her I didn't smoke. She replied me neither, but if we are going to have this conversation, we should have something to do with our hands. So we went to buy cigarettes at a nearby gas station and ended up talking until dawn. And that saved you? Not immediately, but it gave me one more day. Then another and another. The young woman took my hand. Ma'am, I don't know what brought you here tonight, but I know that whatever it isn't permanent. Pain passes, situations change, and you look like someone strong, like someone who has survived difficult things before. My son tried to kill me, I said, and the words came out like a torrent. And now he might get away with it, and I don't know if I have the strength to keep fighting. The young woman nodded without letting go of my hand. Do you know what I learned in these 5 years? That giving up gives the victory to the people who hurt us. She stared at me. If you give up now, your son wins. He wins without even trying. Do you really want to give him that power? Her words penetrated the fog of despair. No, I whispered. I don't. Then come on, let's get away from this bridge. She pulled me gently by the arm. Let's go get a coffee, and you will tell me your story, and I will tell you mine, and we will see how we both survive this night. I followed her away from the river railing, from the temptation to end it all. I didn't know who this young woman was. I didn't know why she had stopped, but in that moment she was my guardian angel. We sat in a diner open all night downtown. She introduced herself as Sarah, a medical student in her final year. I told her everything. The chocolates, the betrayal, the trial Susan. Everything came out like a confession. And when I finished, Sarah looked at me with an intensity that reminded me of Michael. Mrs. Watson, she said, you have survived an assassination attempt. You have survived the betrayal of your son and your sister. You have survived the legal system that seems to be failing you. She leaned forward. Do you really believe you can't survive a trial? And in that moment, something clicked inside me. She was right. I had survived so much. Why give up now? The next morning, I called Robert. I want to hire the best criminal lawyer money can buy, I said. I don't care about the cost. I will use every dollar of those $200,000 if necessary. Are you sure, Emily? Completely. My voice was firm. Daniel wanted that money so much he was willing to kill me for it. Well, then that money will be exactly what puts him in jail. There is poetic irony in that, said Robert, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I also want to hire a psychologist. For me, and for Rachel, and the kids. I took a deep breath. And I want to move. This apartment is full of memories. I need a fresh start. A new apartment, new neighborhood, new life. I looked around my small flat. If I am going to survive this, I need a place that is mine, not a place full of ghosts. Robert remained silent for a moment. Michael would be proud of you, he said finally. I am proud of me, too. And it was true. For the first time in months, I felt something similar to pride. The following weeks were a whirlwind of changes. Robert put me in touch with Catherine Pierce, one of the most respected prosecutors in the state. She had left the DA's office 2 years earlier to open her own firm specializing in domestic violence and elder abuse cases. When I met with her for the first time, I was surprised by her youth. She couldn't be more than 40, but there was a fierceness in her eyes that reminded me of myself in my youth. Mrs. Watson, she said, reviewing my file. I have read the whole case, and I will be honest, it won't be easy. James Miller is good at what he does, but I am better. Why did you accept the case? I asked. I imagine you have clients who can pay more. Catherine leaned back in her chair. My grandmother died 5 years ago. She was 82 years old, and we discovered after her death that my uncle had been stealing from her, manipulating her, isolating her from the rest of the family for years. Her voice hardened. By the time we realized it was too late, she had died without justice, without anyone paying for what they did to her. I am sorry. Me too. Catherine leaned forward. But since then, I have made it my mission that no other elderly woman goes through that without someone fighting for her. So yes, Mrs. Watson, I am going to take your case, and we are going to win. Her confidence was contagious. The move happened in October. Robert helped me find an apartment downtown near the lake. It was smaller than my old flat, but modern, luminous, with views of the park. It cost a fortune in rent, but I decided I deserved it. Rachel and the kids moved in with me. Between the three of us, we turned the space into a home. Lily decorated her room with posters of her favorite bands. Jack installed his PlayStation in the living room. Rachel filled the kitchen with spices and utensils, cooking meals that filled the apartment with delicious smells. For the first time in years, I didn't live alone. For the first time in years, my house felt like a home. Therapy with Dr. Phillips began in November. The first session was difficult. I sat in her office looking at the beige walls and the plants in the corners, not knowing where to start. Mrs. Watson said Dr. Phillips, a woman of about 50 with gray hair and kind eyes. Why are you here? Because my son tried to kill me and I don't know how to live with that. That is the surface reason. She leaned forward. What is the real reason? I thought for a long moment, because I spent 69 years being the person everyone needed me to be, and I don't know who I am without that. Dr. Phillips smiled. Now we are getting somewhere. The trial was scheduled for December. Catherine prepared my testimony with military meticulousness. Session after session, we went over every detail. How I received the chocolates, my visit to their house, Daniel's call the hospital. Everything. Miller is going to try to make you look like a controlling mother, she warned me. He's going to suggest you provoke Daniel with years of emotional manipulation. He's going to use your own kindness against you. How? He will say you were so suffocating, so demanding, that you pushed Daniel to the limit, that your generosity was actually a form of control, that you never gave him space to be himself. The words hurt because there was some truth in them. And how do I answer that with honesty? Catherine stared at me. You admit your mistakes. You acknowledge that maybe you loved imperfectly, but you make it very clear that nothing, absolutely nothing, justifies poisoning your own mother. The first day of the trial arrived with a gray sky and threat of rain. I dressed carefully in a dark blue suit Rachel had helped me choose, comfortable but elegant shoes. The pearl necklace Michael gave me on our 20th anniversary. Rachel accompanied me to the courthouse. The kids stayed with a neighbor. The steps of the courthouse were full of journalists. My case had become national news, mother against son in poisoning trial. The flashes blinded me as I climbed the steps with Rachel holding my arm. Don't look, she whispered. Just walk forward. We entered the building, passing security checks, riding elevators, walking down endless corridors until we reached the courtroom. And there, on the other side of the room, was Daniel. I hadn't seen him in person since that visit in prison. He had lost more weight. His suit was too big for him. But his eyes? His eyes found mine immediately. There was no rage in them, no love either, just resignation. James Miller was by his side, a man of about 60 with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Catherine leaned close to me. Ready? I nodded, although my heart was beating so fast I thought everyone could hear it. Remember, honest, direct, emotional, but not hysterical. She squeezed my shoulder. You are the victim here. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. The judge entered. We all stood up. And so began the battle for my life, my dignity and my right to exist without fear. The prosecutor began presenting the case with surgical precision. Your Honor, members of the jury, said Prosecutor Lewis, a middle-aged man with a deep and authoritative voice. What you are going to hear in this trial is not a common family tragedy. It is the calculated account of a son who planned for 6 months the murder of his own mother for $200,000. Catherine was sitting next to me, taking notes meticulously. From time to time, she looked at me, making sure I was okay. The prosecutor continued detailing the timeline: Daniel's adoption, my dedication as a mother, the gambling debts, the poisoning plan. And when the plan failed, said Lewis, when, by an act of generosity, Mrs. Watson gave the chocolates to her grandchildren instead of consuming them herself. The accused panicked, not because his children were in danger, but because his plan had been discovered. I looked at Daniel. He was pale, with his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. James Miller whispered something in his ear, but Daniel didn't seem to listen. The prosecution calls its first witness, announced the judge, Jessica Vega. A murmur ran through the room. Jessica entered, escorted by 2 guards. She was wearing a prison uniform and chains on her hands. She had aged 10 years in 3 months. Her pregnancy was now visible under the baggy clothes. She sat on the witness stand and swore to tell the truth. Prosecutor Lewis approached. Miss Vega, do you know the accused Daniel Watson? Yes. Her voice was barely audible. Can you describe the nature of your relationship? Jessica looked at Daniel. He finally looked up. Their eyes met. We were lovers, she said. For 2 years. And are you pregnant by him? Yes. 5 months? The prosecutor nodded. Miss Vega, I understand that initially you provided a statement to the police implicating Mr. Watson in the poisoning of his mother. Then you recanted. Why? Jessica swallowed hard. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of going to jail. Of losing my baby. Daniel told me his lawyer could make everything look like my idea that I would be the only guilty one. But today you have decided to tell the truth. Why? Jessica took a deep breath. Tears ran down her cheeks. Because last night I had a nightmare. I dreamed my baby grew up asking me who his father was, and in the dream I told him his father was a murderer and that I helped him. She sobbed. I don't want my son to grow up with that truth. I don't want to be that person. Then tell us, Miss Vega, who planned to poison Emily Watson? Daniel. It was all Daniel's idea. Jessica looked directly at the accused. I just supported him. I encouraged him. I told him it would be easy, that no one would suspect. But the idea of the plan, The purchase of the arsenic. It was all him. And did you know he was going to send the poisoned chocolates to his mother on her birthday? Yes. He showed me the messages. He was excited. He said soon we would be free, that we would have money to start over. And what did you feel when you found out that Mr. Watson's children had been poisoned instead of his mother? Jessica collapsed. Panic. Horror. I hadn't thought about the kids. I hadn't thought about anyone but us. She looked up at me for the first time. Mrs. Watson, I am sorry. I know it means nothing, but I am so sorry. I didn't answer. I couldn't. James Miller stood up for cross-examination. Miss Vega, isn't it true that you provided this new version of events only after the district attorney offered you a deal? Yes, and that this deal significantly reduces your sentence from 15 years to possibly 5? Yes. So you have a very clear incentive to say what the prosecution wants to hear. Isn't that so? Jessica hesitated. I am telling the truth. The truth, Miller smiled, or the version of the truth that keeps you out of jail the longest. Objection. Catherine stood up. He is badgering the witness. Sustained. The judge looked at Miller. Counsel, move on. But the damage was done. Miller had sown the doubt. The afternoon brought Rachel's testimony. My daughter-in-law took the stand with a dignity that filled me with pride. She was wearing a simple black dress, hair tied back, no makeup. She looked tired, but strong. The prosecutor began with basic questions: her relationship with Daniel, the years of marriage, the kids. Then he got to the critical day. Mrs. Watson described what happened on March 15th when your mother-in-law, Mrs. Emily Watson, visited your house. Rachel took a deep breath. Emily arrived around noon with a box of chocolates. She said Daniel had given them to her for her birthday but wanted to share them with us. How did you react? I was surprised. Daniel hadn't given anything to his mother in years. Rachel looked down. Now I understand why that gift was different. What happened next? Emily left. I left the box in the kitchen. That night before dinner, Lily and Jack found the chocolates and ate several. Her voice broke. Around 2 a.m, they started vomiting. They had seizures. We took them to the emergency room. And your husband? How did Daniel react? He didn't ask about the kids. The first thing he asked was if his mother had eaten the chocolates. Rachel looked at me. That was the first time I suspected something terrible had happened. Miller stood up for cross-examination. Mrs. Watson, isn't it true that you have initiated divorce proceedings against my client? Yes. And that you are seeking full custody of the children and substantial financial compensation? I am seeking to protect my children from a man who almost killed them. Or are you taking advantage of a tragic situation to get revenge for a failed marriage? Objection. Catherine jumped up. Withdrawn. Miller smiled. Mrs. Watson, did you ever see Daniel buy or handle the chocolates? No. Did you ever hear him admit he put arsenic in them? In the hospital, he confessed. Answer yes or no. Did you hear him explicitly say I put arsenic in the chocolates? Rachel hesitated. No, not with those exact words. Thank you. No more questions. When Rachel stepped down, our eyes met. I saw tears in her eyes, but also determination. We had lost a battle, but not the war. The prosecution calls Emily Watson to the stand. My heart stopped for a moment. Catherine squeezed my hand. Calm down. Breathe. Remember, honest, direct, emotional, but controlled. I stood up with shaking legs. Every step toward the stand seemed like an eternity. I swore on the Bible to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I sat down. I looked at the room full of people, curious journalists, relatives of Daniel I didn't know, and in the first row, Susan. My sister was looking at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. Prosecutor Lewis approached with a reassuring smile. Mrs. Watson, tell us about your son, Daniel. How did he come to your family? I adopted him when he was 2 years old. My voice was firm. His biological parents had died in an accident. He was in an orphanage in the city. When I saw him for the first time, I knew he was my son. And how was raising him? Difficult at first. He had trauma from losing his parents, nightmares, episodes of anger. But with love and patience, he became a wonderful child. I looked at Daniel, or so I thought. When did you start noticing changes in his behavior? In adolescence. Small thefts, lies. My husband wanted to seek professional help, but I thought it was just a phase. I looked down. It was my first mistake of many. Tell us about the day of your 69th birthday. I narrated the whole story. The chocolates, my decision to share them, Daniel's call the hospital. And when did you know with certainty that your son had tried to kill you? In the hospital chapel, when he looked me in the eyes and told me I was a burden, that I had lived too long, that he needed my money now. Tears ran down my cheeks, but my voice didn't falter. In that moment, the son I knew ceased to exist. Lewis nodded. Mrs. Watson, some might argue that you were an overly protective, overly controlling mother. What do you say to that? That they are right. The honesty resonated in the room. I made mistakes. I protected him from the consequences of his actions. I gave him everything without teaching him the value of earning things. I loved him in a way that perhaps wasn't healthy. I paused, looking directly at the jury, but none of that justifies him trying to kill me. Nothing. Many mothers make mistakes and their children don't poison them. I am not responsible for his decisions. He is an adult. He chose to buy the arsenic. He chose to put it in the chocolates. He chose to send it knowing it would kill me. And how do you feel now toward Daniel? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. It was the truth. A part of me still loves him, still remembers the 2-year-old boy who called me mom for the first time. But another part is dead. The part that trusted blindly, that forgave without limits, that loved without protecting itself. Can you forgive him? I don't know. Maybe someday. But today the only thing I know is that I deserve to live. I deserve to be safe. And I deserve justice. The prosecutor nodded. No more questions. Now came the part I feared, cross-examination by James Miller. He approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Watson, you have admitted you made mistakes as a mother. Is it possible those mistakes contributed to Daniel's mental state? It is possible. But that doesn't excuse murder. Let's not talk about excuses. Let's talk about explanations. Miller walked in front of me. Isn't it true that Daniel asked you for financial help last year? Yes. And you refused? I refused to give him money to gamble. There is a difference. But you knew your son was in serious financial trouble. I knew he had problems. I didn't know the magnitude. And it didn't seem like your responsibility as a mother to find out? To help him? Objection. Catherine stood up. Counsel is victim blaming, overruled. You may answer Mrs. Watson. I looked at Miller directly. My responsibility as a mother ended when Daniel turned 18. From there on, my help was a gift, not an obligation, and I refused to gift money I knew would be wasted. So you denied him help when he needed it most. I denied being an accomplice to his gambling addiction. There is a difference. Miller changed tactics. Mrs. Watson, how many times did you remind Daniel he was adopted? The question hit me like a punch. No, I didn't keep count. You told others about how you rescued him from the orphanage sometimes. It was a story of our family, a story where you were the heroine and Daniel was the broken child who needed to be saved. Objection. Withdrawn. Miller looked at me coldly. Watson, is it possible that your constant reminder that Daniel owed you his life created in him a resentment that eventually became toxic? I wanted to deny it, but Daniel's words in prison echoed in my mind. You loved me so much you suffocated me. It is possible, I admitted, but resentment doesn't justify murder. Many people have complicated relationships with their parents and don't poison them. One last question, Mrs. Watson. You recorded your conversation with Daniel in prison without his knowledge. My blood froze. Yes, and that recording was obtained through deception. It was obtained to seek the truth, a truth you had already decided before entering that prison. The truth my son confessed with his own words. Miller smiled, or words you provoked him to say during a moment of emotional vulnerability. No more questions. I stepped down from the stand feeling I had won and lost at the same time. The trial continued for 3 more days. Medical witnesses confirmed the arsenic poisoning. Toxicology experts explained how the dose in the chocolates was enough to kill an adult. Police officers narrated Daniel's arrest. But Miller counterattacked every point, questioned every procedure, sowed doubt at every opportunity. On the 4th day, when we thought the testimonies had ended, Catherine stood up. "Your Honor, the prosecution has an additional last-minute witness." Miller protested immediately. "Objection? We were not notified of any additional witness. Your Honor," said Catherine, "this witness appeared only yesterday. We couldn't notify before because we didn't know of her existence." The judge considered. "Who is the witness?" "Susan Miller, the victim's sister." A murmur of surprise ran through the room. I looked at Susan in the first row. She was pale, hands clenched in her lap. What was happening? Susan took the stand as if walking toward her own execution. "Miss Miller," began Catherine, "I understand you have been funding Daniel's defense." "That is correct, yes." Susan's voice was barely audible. "Why?" "Because I believed he was innocent. I believed my sister was exaggerating that Daniel had made a mistake, but not a crime. And now?" Susan looked at me. Tears ran down her cheeks. "Yesterday, Daniel called me from prison. He asked me to testify in his favor, to say Emily had been abusive, controlling, that she practically forced him to act this way. And you accepted at first?" "Yes, because I wanted to save my nephew," Susan sobbed. "But then he asked me something else. He asked me if I could convince Emily to drop the charges. And when I told him I didn't think it was possible, he said—" "What did he say?" Susan closed her eyes. "He said, then another way is found to shut her up. She is old. Old people have accidents." The room exploded in murmurs. "Order!" shouted the judge. "Daniel Watson suggested you cause harm to your own sister?" "He didn't suggest it directly, but the implication was clear." Susan looked at me with eyes full of pain, and in that moment I understood not only that he was guilty of the poisoning, but that he had no remorse that he would do it again if he had the opportunity. "And that is why you decided to testify." "I decided to testify because I spent 3 months defending a monster while blaming my sister for being a victim." Susan broke down. "Emily, forgive me. Please forgive me." I couldn't answer. Tears blinded me. Catherine continued. "Do you have the recordings of those phone calls?" "Yes." "Daniel didn't know calls from prison are recorded automatically. I requested copies yesterday. The defense has them in their file, Your Honor." Miller stood up furious. "Your Honor, this is an ambush. It is evidence counsel." The judge looked at Susan. "Are you willing to hand over those recordings as evidence?" "Yes." "Then they are admitted as evidence." During the recess, the recordings were played. Daniel's voice filled the room. "Aunt Susan, I need you to testify. Tell them Mom was always controlling, that she made me feel less. You know, build the narrative. And if Emily doesn't drop the charges, then another way is found. She is old. Old people have accidents. They fall down the stairs. They forget to take their medication correctly." The room went completely silent when the recording ended. I looked at Daniel. He had his head in his hands. Miller was pale. There was no turning back now. Closing arguments were brief. Catherine summarized the case with devastating precision. Daniel had planned his mother's murder for 6 months. He had executed it by sending her poisoned chocolates. And when he failed, he tried to manipulate the legal system and threaten his own aunt to avoid consequences. Miller did what he could. He argued Daniel was mentally unstable, that debts had pushed him to the limit, that there was no real premeditation. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury retired to deliberate. We waited 3 hours. I sat on a bench outside the courtroom with Rachel and Susan. My sister hadn't stopped crying since her testimony. "Emily," she said finally, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I failed you in the worst way possible. But I want you to know I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it." I looked at her. My younger sister, the girl I had protected from our alcoholic father, the teenager I had helped pay for college, the woman who had betrayed me in the deepest way. "Susan, I can't forgive you today," I said honestly. "I am too hurt, too exhausted. But But maybe someday we can start over." She nodded, accepting what I offered. "That is more than I deserve." Rachel took both our hands. "Families break," she said, "but they can also be rebuilt, just in different ways." The courtroom door opened. "The jury has reached a verdict." We entered again. My heart was beating so fast I thought everyone could hear it. The judge looked at the jury foreman. "Have you reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor." "How do you find the accused on the charge of attempted first-degree murder?" "Guilty." The word echoed in the room like thunder. "On the charge of child endangerment?" "Guilty." "On the charge of fraud and forgery of documents?" "Guilty." "Guilty, guilty, guilty." Every word was a weight lifted off my shoulders. Daniel didn't react, he simply sat staring into the void. The judge announced sentencing would be in 2 weeks. I walked out of the courthouse under a bright sun that seemed appropriate for the moment. Journalists surrounded me immediately. "Mrs. Watson, how do you feel? Are you going to forgive your son? What message do you have for other victims of family abuse?" I stopped on the stairs. Catherine was by my side. Rachel held my hand. I looked at the cameras. "I just want to say this. For 69 years, I lived thinking my value depended on how much I could give. That being a good person meant sacrificing everything, forgiving everything, enduring everything." I paused, choosing my words carefully. My son tried to kill me because he knew I would always forgive him, because he knew I would never say no, because he knew my love had no limits. And he was right. For years, my love had no limits, and that almost cost me my life. So my message is this: love, but with boundaries. Give, but without losing yourselves. Forgive, but not the unforgivable things. And above all, know that you matter. Your life matters. Your safety matters. I am not a heroine. I am a survivor. And if I could find the strength to defend myself at 69, you can too. The cameras flashed. The questions continued. But I had already said everything I needed to say. I walked down the stairs with Rachel and Susan by my side. For the first time in months, I felt free. 2 weeks later, the sentence was 18 years in prison. Daniel didn't appeal. In his final statement to the judge, he simply said, "I am sorry for everything." I don't know if he meant it. Probably I will never know. But I discovered I didn't care that much anymore. 6 months later, my life had changed in ways I never imagined. The apartment downtown had become a real home. Rachel now worked as a psychologist, specializing in family therapy. Lily and Jack went to school, made friends, laughed again. Susan and I had started to rebuild our relationship slowly. We had coffee every 2 weeks. We talked about superficial things at first, but little by little, trust returned. I had written a book about my experience, not to earn money or fame, but to help other women who were going through similar situations. It was titled, "After the Chocolates, A Story of Betrayal and Rebirth." And to my surprise, it had become a bestseller. One afternoon in June, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found Sarah, the young nurse who had saved me on the bridge that night. "Mrs. Watson?" She smiled widely. "I hope you don't mind me showing up like this. I got your address through your publisher." "Sarah, come in, please." "What brings you here?" We went into the living room. I served her tea. "I read your book," she said, "and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "Because you saved me just as much as I saved you that night," Sarah smiled. "Seeing how you overcame all this, how you became an advocate for other women, inspired me to do the same." "What do you mean?" "I joined an organization that helps victims of family abuse. I work with older women who are being exploited or abused by their own families." Her eyes shone. "Your story showed me that even in the darkest moments we can find light, and I want to be that light for other people." My eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, you don't know how much that means to me." We hugged. 2 women who had saved each other at different times, now united in a common purpose. 1 year later, I was sitting on the balcony of my apartment watching the sunset over the lake. Lily was in her room studying for exams. Jack was playing video games in the living room. Rachel was making dinner in the kitchen, singing softly. Sounds of a family. Sounds of a home. My phone rang. It was Robert. "Emily, how are you?" "Fine, Robert, very fine. I am calling because, well, Daniel requested a visit. He says he wants to see you. The name caused a chill, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was just sadness. And what do you think? It is your decision. You have no obligation to see him, but if you decide to do it, I will go with you. I thought for a long moment. No, I said finally. I am not ready. Maybe I never will be. And that is okay. That is okay, repeated Robert. We hung up. I looked toward the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. A day was ending. Another would begin tomorrow, and I would be here to see it. Alive, free, whole. I turned 72 in an elegant restaurant surrounded by the people who mattered. Rachel and her kids, now 17 and 14. Susan, who had sold her house and moved to the city to be closer. Robert and his wife. Catherine, my lawyer, who had become a close friend. Sarah and her new baby. And Ralph, the investigator who had helped me during the trial and who, to everyone's surprise, including mine, had become something more than a friend. We raised glasses of wine. To Emily, said, Rachel, the strongest woman I know. To Grandma, said Lily and Jack in unison, who taught us it is never too late to defend yourself. To my sister, said Susan with tears in her eyes, who taught me the true meaning of forgiveness. We drank, laughed, shared stories. And when it was time for dessert, the waiter brought a box wrapped in gold paper. For a moment my heart stopped, but it was just Jack joking. Relax, Grandma, they are Mom's homemade cookies, not poisoned chocolates. Everyone laughed. Me too, because the horror of 3 years ago no longer defined me. I had survived. I had healed. I had learned. I had learned that true love includes boundaries, that family is defined by actions, not blood, that forgiving oneself is as important as forgiving others, and that it is never, ever too late to start over. I opened the box. The cookies smelled delicious. I shared them with everyone at the table, because now I knew something I didn't know before. Sharing is beautiful, but not at the cost of your own life. Giving is beautiful, but not until you are empty. Loving is beautiful, but not without loving yourself first. I looked around the table at these people who had filled my life with light after so much darkness, and I knew with absolute certainty that I had found my home, not in a place, in myself. Daniel is currently serving the 6th year of his 18-year sentence at the state penitentiary. I haven't seen him since the day of the sentencing. I don't know if I ever will, but I have learned that closure doesn't always come from confrontations or dramatic forgiveness. Sometimes closure comes simply from choosing to live, from choosing peace over justice, from choosing yourself, and that in the end is enough.